to start postdoctoral fellowship. And Wally went back to Kansas to try to finish his PhD, which he didn't do.
Do I remember that he worked with Roger?
But he's originally worked with Barker and then with Jack Gump.
Yeah, and so Barker was this great ethologist.
Yes,
And, yeah.
ecologist.
Ecologist.
And Barker was very committed to observation, which is a method that FACS is ideal for if you want to really measure what people are doing with their face. It's a method that has almost dropped out of most of social psychology, to my regret. But anyhow, we kept contact by the mail, and in '62, I had written my first grant and was told it was funded and that we would, I would have some money, and the grant started in '63, and at the moment I got it, I put in a supplement for more money to hire Wally, and asked him, should I do this? Would you come? And he did. And so that was '64, and so for the next 25 years we worked together. And over the period of time, he changed from a research assistant or a project manager to being a true collaborator. And on FACS, we sat facing each other, studying each other's faces, working on this 8 or 10 hours a day, every day of the week. And I wouldn't and couldn't have done it without him, and he wouldn't and couldn't have done it without me. It really was the one piece of really essential collaboration, and it was an unbelievable job of record keeping, and but we did it.
Yeah, I remember Wally's office in the Human Interaction Lab, and of course, Wally was very interested in using computers, but most of the records were these paper records, and he could put his hands on almost anything.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we had photographs to keep track of. We had to film each movement. I mean, an enormous amount. And I mean, this is, if you look at this carefully, you'll realize this is not a modern computer. This was printed, let's see, 78, and there was a computer with not much memory, I think a 1620 at the computer center. And so I would write this.
Oh, that's how you did it, yeah.
And then one of my secretaries would take it over, and then we would clean up the typos, and then it got printed there. That's what this is.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of for those of us who were outside of the lab. I remember when I was thinking of coming there for the sabbatical, it was like Ekman and Friesen were like Lennon and McCartney, and everybody wondered who wrote Yesterday and who was singing on this song. And later, when I got to know you both, it was really clear you had this wonderful complementarity of not only skills, but patience. There were things that you loved and that Wally didn't, and vice versa. And at that time, in that moment, for this project, it really was a dream team.
Yeah, well, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And there was very little overlap in what we brought to the table. Yeah. And but essentially, we had the right combination of skills. The only thing I did that he didn't do was to put the needles into my own face.
Well, that's my next question. So let me just say that there are two great urban legends that are in the lore about the development of FACS, and I want to ask you about each one and ask you to comment on it, including, for once and for all, making it clear whether it's true or false. And the first legend is that when you and Wally were working on FACS, you stuck electrodes into your facial muscles, passed currents through them, and observed the resulting appearance changes.
Well, it's absolutely true. I didn't do it for many muscles. I mean, Duchenne had used surface electrodes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
to stimulate the face. Because the picture of him, it's almost like,
he used what he called the galvanometer.
Yeah.
Now it was good in some areas of the face, but the problem is that in other areas of the face, muscle lies on top of muscles. Same problem that EMG has. So you're really measuring activity in a region. You don't know whether it's a specific strand of muscle that's producing it. And there were one area involving what is, in FACS terms, AU 10, 11, and 12 mostly 10 and 11, where I couldn't feel confident that by palpating my face that I was actually activating the right muscle in my photographing and filming it. So I went to the chairman of the Department of Anatomy in the medical school and told him my problem and asked him if he would put a needle in and stimulate the muscle and we could check.
Oh, that's how you knew where to put it. I had this image of you guys just kind of...
Oh, no. Because it wasn't pleasant.
No.
And in order to produce a sufficient level of contraction for the skin to move, it took a lot of pulsing. So we only did it for 2 muscles, and I didn't see any reason why to do it on more than one person. So that was just me, while he was watching and confirming that we did the right thing.
Yeah. For those of you who have ever had the neurological procedure called EMG testing, where they stimulate nerves to look at conduction velocity, and they do that in big nerves like in your legs, I assume that it's a very unpleasant
It's very unpleasant, and it's even more unpleasant in your face.
So I had these pictures of Duchenne, which are the famous ones, and you can kind of see how he's...
Yeah, this guy had no pain sensation. I later taught the anatomy of the face to the medical students for a year or 2. Because I knew it.
Yeah,
no
you
one
lived
else.
it.
That's right. No one else knows it. Still.
Legend number 2.
Yes.
When you and Wally were working on facts, you would make the expressions voluntarily, and each of you experienced strong emotional feelings when you made certain expressions, and you didn't tell each other because you were both kind of sensitive about it and a little embarrassed. And later you did tell each other about it, and I'd like you to confirm or deny that legend. And then, of course, it's interesting to me because that's the basis of the first collaborative work that the 3 of us did together. But
absolutely correct. It didn't take very long. I mean, after a few weeks, we started sharing it, and then we started testing it out. And it was clear that it was only with the configurations that we thought were associated with emotions universally where this occurred. Now I know that I can produce that with just part of each expression. Is that a peculiarity of me? What's the minimum number of muscles you need to make out of the universal expression to turn on the physiology of emotion? I know what they are for me, and I know that the muscles in the upper region of the face are much more powerful than the ones in the lower. The lower I don't need at all to turn it on. And when I demonstrate things, I'm having to feel all these rotten emotions, which I don't like having to feel, so I don't do it too often. But we were then convinced that that we needed to do research on this, but it wasn't until you showed up that there was a possibility. And then, as I remember, we borrowed, and we thought, hey, this Levenson isn't completely straight-laced. He'll be willing, I mean, he plays jazz, and he'll be willing to do such a cockeyed thing, because it did seem a little cockeyed that making the movement would produce the emotion, although I later learned Stanislavski did say make the movement and the feeling will follow. Yeah. So it's not the part of Stanislavski that most people
And there's that Poe quote that we later found where he was saying that he often figured out what people were feeling by putting their expression on his face.
There's a case of a patient with prosopagnosia who can't tell what emotion someone is feeling, but if you ask them to make it, they can then tell.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's clearly a dissociable circuit. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so both of those urban legends are true. We're coming towards the end of the interview, and I had a couple of other questions, really bringing this up into the present.
Before you do that.
And I also wanted to say something before I did that too. That although it's the 30th anniversary of FACS, do you know it's the 25th anniversary of our science paper that came out of this this experience that you guys had when we actually tried to see whether...
Should I interview you? Just turn the... Or who would interview the both of us?
I think there's no more tape in the camera. For the last hour we were just talking.
The thing I wanted to say before this was that I wanted to first mention Hjörsvju, which I'm mispronouncing, a Swedish anatomist at the University of Lund, who I heard about and met when I was about a year away from finishing FACS. And he had written a book a little small book on the anatomy of facial movement, showing for combinations of two muscles, it didn't go further, there was only one mistake in it. Everything else was right, and it was very confirmatory for me. And he was a very nice and generous man. The other thing I wanted to mention is that after we got it, it took us almost a year to transform what we had into a self-instructional material with all the examples and with a test at the end. And then at that point I had in my lab Linda Cameras, Rainer Krause, and Harriet Oster as postdocs, and Blossom Young, Charlotte Baker. Blossom Young was a research assistant who lives in the Bay Area, and Charlotte Baker, who is getting her PhD in linguistics at Berkeley. And I sat them down and I said, "Our fate lies in your hands." This was really, I didn't laugh, Robert, nor did they. I'm glad I didn't have you as one of those.
Well, I can just see you doing this,
Yes,
you know.
I said, what's going to happen now for the next 4 or 5 weeks is you're going to learn facts, and then you're going to take a test. And if you come up with the same scoring and you're reliable, we can publish it. If it doesn't, I'm out of money. I can't apply for any more. If it's the case that no matter how hard you work, it's really not reliable, well, la jus sans fait, that's the way it is. But if it was to occur because one of you didn't work as hard, then it would be tragic for science and tragic for Wally and I, whose research careers would be over. So you must work at this as hard as you can. And they did, and it worked.
It's kind of like the basketball coaches who say, just go out there and have fun.
Yeah, right.
Your version of that, yeah. Well, yeah, and of course that was a very interesting group of people, many of whom went on to make major contributions in this area. So this is probably a good jumping off point because in a way, fax has always been an incredible investment of time and effort, and once you learn it, you never stop coding. I mean,
you never see
the world again. But there's several developments now that would suggest another way that this might be done, and one of them is the automation of fax. And you and I have talked about it a number of times over the year, and I always take the Luddite position, that this will never happen. These computers are just passing.
No, you take a worse position, I think, which is that once it becomes easy to get fax scoring, then all kinds of idiots will do idiotic research, and you'll regret to your dying day that you ever unleashed this. Right now, it's only really serious people who go through the effort of learning it. So we have good science coming out with fax. Do you remember saying that?
I think I will be yes, I do. It doesn't sound like me, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
another interpretation is, if I've spent 100 hours learning it, why should someone else be able to do it in an hour?
That's what it's all about. So where do you think that is now? And
there are a lot of people interested in it. The IEEE is meeting in Amsterdam, and this, I believe, will be shown there.
Oh, good.
They asked me to come.
It'd be nice that they hear that thing about that I said, just in case they ever apply for money for them.
And it's on automated measurement of face and gesture. And instead of giving the lead talk, I'm going to send this video and save the planet a little bit of carbon and me a little bit of
You'll get an
backache.
offset for that.
Yes, that's right. There are a lot of people interested in it. It has a lot of commercial use, quite outside of psychology. It's close. I believe the two leading teams we've worked with, Jeff Cohn and Kanadi at Pittsburgh Carnegie Mellon, and Sanowski and Marnie, Javier and Marnie, I can't remember their last names, but they're the principal people at Salk, UC San Diego. Sanowski and I got the first grant to do this and made some progress. It was originally turned down by NIMH when I put it in myself because they said there aren't computers who can do this kind of parallel processing. The review teams didn't understand. But Sanowski heard about it and said, of course we know how to do that. We use such computers, and we got NSF to fund it. Then I was able to get, at one point, the government to fund our supplying both groups with the same video and having them work together. But after a year, the government lost interest. Now now these guys are both about 80% of the way there, if the lighting is even, in producing a rather low error rate. And I hope I've convinced the government that I should run the horse track, hire these 2 horses to be in a race, provide the fodder, and provide the referees they agree to, so we can really, only way we'll find out the relative advantages and disadvantages of each, so they work with the same material and it's evaluated by the same evaluators. They've both agreed. It'll cost a few million. It'll take maybe a year and a half, and we'll know as far as you can get. And I think we'll get there. I think it'll flag things that it can't decide about, and that'll be about 8 to 10%. So you'll still need fact scorers.
Whew. Yeah. Well, that's good news for those of us who spent the time to learn it. And also, it's interesting if you can do that. There is a possibility that together they may do better than either separately.
Absolutely.
And that
they
would be
work better on certain kinds of appearance clues.
The flip side of it, which I think you may not get enough credit for, is the huge impact that this work has had on the animation and simulation of facial movement.
Yes.
And going from the very crude attempts that you would see in facial animation, like in the Disney cartoons, to these really quite superb jobs that people like Pixar are doing now.
And Disney, too.
Disney.
And they all acknowledge they're using facts.
Yeah.
And every year I update one. I just was at Lucasfilm earlier this week, and I was at Pixar a year ago, and Disney in the fall. So I just they already know 90% of what I know, but I keep learning enough more that they're interested in using it. So it's really played an important role in entertainment. There's a book for actors based on facts. It's had many more applications than I ever dreamed of.
Yeah, why don't we end on that? I was just wondering, I know, everybody loves all their children, and Facts has produced a lot of great work. A lot of it's in the book, What the Face Reveals,
Yes.
and which is in the second edition that has a nice end note with you that you've updated talking about that work. Just quickly, what are some of the things the uses that you've really felt good about, and if there was one study that you had $1 million or $1 billion to invest in that would use facts that you'd like to see done that hasn't been done, what would the general area be?
Tough questions, Robert, because I don't think in those terms much anymore, because I only think I'm still doing research, but only on things that I think I can answer within a year. When you're middle 70s, it doesn't make sense to take on a project. I wouldn't take on facts now.
No.
I'm not certain. I hope I have 8 more years, but I'm not as certain as I was when I was 30 years younger. What I would really like to have the funds to see someone else do and just be an advisor on is to answer the synonyms question. And I think I know the different methods that would need to be used, and it would be multiple methods, to find out of those configurations, those families of expressions that we've identified for each of the 7, which ones are associated with different social contexts. And if they mean and are associated with different social contexts, we're going to find different physiological underpinnings. And we have some of the means to do that now. So that's, to me, the giant project that lies ahead. And I fear that everyone is in such a rush to get answers quick that that's a 5 to 10 year project. I'd love to play a role in getting that started and have people down the line start providing us. And then we'd have a true dictionary of the emotional meanings of facial expression.
And I suppose, it's interesting because you started with the anatomy with facts, but always behind the scene has been this idea of working back to the emotional meaning. Well, on behalf of everybody who's ever learned facts, everybody who's ever used it, everybody who's ever read the great science that's come out of it, and everybody who will do that in the future, I want to thank you and thank Wally, who couldn't be here, for this wonderful gift to science.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your interest and your willingness to do this. And thank you, Wally. Wouldn't be here, sitting here talking to Bob if it wasn't for your dedication and involvement.